Hi, and welcome to the OrgDev Podcast. So what does it take for people on opposite sides of an issue to overcome what seems like intractable differences and work together for change? How do you get large groups of people to come together to tackle your most complex challenges? We're joined today from South Africa by the remarkable Dr Louise Van Rhyn. Louise is a social entrepreneur, leadership and organisation development practitioner, and a movement leader. And we really do mean a movement leader. She describes herself as an organisational and leadership developer, designer of impactful learning processes, systems convener, bridge builder, possibility creator, community builder, and passionate South African. She's the founder of Symphonia, a leadership and development social enterprise committed to developing leadership capacity at scale. They support leaders across sectors who are committed to creating flourishing and inclusive organisational communities. She supported many leaders in small and large organisations across many industries across South Africa, UK, Europe, and the USA as well. In 2010, Louise made a commitment to see whether it may be possible to address some of South Africa's most intractable challenges through cross-sector collaboration and citizen leadership at scale. Louise is known for Partners for Possibility, a multifaceted social change process that was designed to strengthen leadership capacity in under-resourced schools and commercial organisations across the country through cross-sector reciprocal co-action and co-learning partnerships between business leaders and school principals. Partners for Possibility won many awards nationally and internationally for innovation impact and has positively impacted over 1 million people. So, Louise, we're absolutely honoured for you to make time today to join us. Danny and I have been looking forward to this conversation all week long, haven't we?
We have, absolutely. Gary's done a bit of an introduction to you. So just to kick us off, just tell us a bit, could you give us a bit of a sense about the work you're doing right now and what's really exciting?
So my work keeps changing. I live in a country where the opportunities to contribute is all around you. And so the work that I do at the moment, most of my work is working with corporate teams, leadership teams in corporates, using the experience that the lessons we've learned from Partners for Possibility in these organizations around how do you really shift the needle? How do you move the needle and do leadership development work that has a lot of impact and can be felt by both the participants, but also the people who they work with and their key stakeholders. So I'm kind of gone full circle back into just most of my work in corporates. Obviously, always, once a movement leader, always a movement leader. So I have some thoughts about what we could do in the rest of the country. But in this season, most of my work is in organizations.
And can you just, Partners for Possibilities was such a big part of what you did. Can you just tell us a bit more about that for people who might not be familiar with it? What was that about and what did you do?
Yeah, so I probably need to go back a little bit in the history. I did my doctorate with Rolf Stacey at the Centre for Management and Complexity at Hertfordshire. So I had this understanding of organizations as complex, responsive processes of relating, and returned to South Africa thinking that's where I'm going to spend my time. I'm going to use all of these wonderful things I've learned, and I'm going to work with leaders and corporate leaders. And very soon I realized that would be a missed opportunity because when we work in an organization and we forget the context of that organization and we forget the country, the big challenges faced by the country, then the organization has little chance to succeed. So I became quite committed to the idea of using what we know about business and tackling the big issues in South Africa. So it was a very traditional kind of business as a force for good in the world idea. And what it ended up being, and with lots of trial and error and trying different avenues, we, over between 2010 and 2024, over a period of 14 years, partnered about 1,000 business leaders. Sorry, 2,000, not 1,000. 2,000 business leaders with school principals of under-resourced schools. And the idea was that these partnerships would bring together people with knowledge and experience of HR and finance and how organizations work and teams, etc., with committed and compassionate school principals who have most of them never had any training in how to lead organizations with adults. They all, came through being teachers. And by bringing these people together, it was a very beautiful example of 1 + 1 becomes 10, because when you do that well, and people can really tap into the wisdom and the contribution from both, rather than one person having, an unequal power relationship where one person is the mentor or the coach. This was a co-learning and co-action partnership. It was reciprocal. The business leaders learned from the school principals learned from the business leaders, and then between them, they did work in their schools, in their communities, with the teachers, the other parents in the community, and then it just kind of snowballed across the country. So the latest figures was more than 1 million lives impacted by this work, and for me, what I'm most proud about it is using organizational development and what we all love and care about for much bigger impact than just working in an organization.
No, it was really compelling. I remember the first time I heard about it, and it was just a really exciting program. So before we move on, so you've chosen Symphonia as the name for the organization that you do your work under, and there's a story behind that, isn't there? So can you just tell us?
There is a story.
A little bit about that.
So we were living and working in the UK. I was doing my doctorate, but I was very homesick. And anybody who's ever lived in South Africa will know that, well, Africa's in your blood. You can go and live in other countries, but you also always hanker to go back one day. And I read The Art of Possibility by Ben and Rosanda. And for anybody watching this, I think it's the best business book or the best leadership book that's ever been published. Reading this book, and they were telling the story about their visit to South Africa. And they said everywhere we went, people were talking about South Africa. It was like a living, breathing entity, a symphony of voices, Symphonia. And literally overnight, I changed the name of my company to Symphonia. I said one day we will go back to South Africa and we're going to convene conversations with South Africans taking responsibility for the future that they are committed to. The story has a follow-up because we then in 2008 invited Ben and Ros to South Africa, and Ben would often tell the story. He said he met President Mandela at Davos, and he said to President Mandela, "You are the first leader of Symphonia because you created an environment where every voice is heard." And that's my work. My work is to create environments where we can tap into the beautiful contribution of every single person in the room, rather than thinking the answers will come from a select few people at the top of the organization.
And you said something really important there about people taking responsibility for the future they want to create. And often, whether it's in organizations or in wider society, people feel that sense of helplessness and a lack of agency. What have you found as a way of helping people step up and take responsibility?
So again, I think that's at the heart of our work, because what we've realized is many people have a story, and the story said, it's not mine, it's someone else's, I don't have the power, I don't have the authority. And so our work is all around inviting people to co-own the reality. It's not someone else who's creating this reality. We are doing it. I was working with an amazing group of people yesterday, but they had a story that said, it's EXCO. We have to get EXCO right. And through our work, at the end of the day, they realized, no, EXCO is part of the organization we're creating. And they have to watch out because we are coming for them. We are inviting them to a different relationship that's moving away from the traditional parent-child. For me, that's the best description of the challenge we have, is this kind of parent-child dynamic. And we're going to move into being citizen leaders, where we all co-creating a future that we are wanting to have. And I don't know whether you guys are finding it, but in South Africa, the biggest change agents in this space is the Gen Zs, because they are holding up a mirror saying, that world that you guys have taken for granted, it's not a world that we are interested in. We want to be in a world where we are collaboratively creating the future that is going to work for all of us.
There's so many threads to pull on there, Louise. And one of the things you talked about, though, is something that we often try and work with organizations with is that citizenship of an organization. And you say something about, are you a consumer or a citizen? How good are organizations at clarifying what it means to be a citizen in the organization?
So I don't think it's a conversation that many people are participating in. Once, I almost want to put a warning sign. If they're going to invite me into the conversation, that's the conversation we're going to have. So, and the reason I feel so passionate about it, I also have to acknowledge where a lot of this thinking comes from. I have had the enormous privilege to have Peter Block as both a friend and a mentor. He doesn't like the word mentor, but a friend and a colleague. And I don't know whether we as a field acknowledge the role that Peter plays enough, because he has influenced so many of our thoughts. But that's one of the core ideas with flawless consulting, which is one of the processes that I'm involved in, is the idea that as a consultant, I get to choose. Am I going to be a partner and a collaborative partner, or am I going to be a pair of hands or the expert? Am I going to try and call the shots, or am I going to respond to someone else calling the shots, or am I going to show up as a partner? So you'll see me do this all the time because I'm so used to. That's the difference. And as an external consultant, it's often easy for me to have the conversation with the very senior people in the organization, because I don't have all of the constraints around, where am I sitting in the hierarchy and should I be allowed to have this conversation? And then when I start to talk to the senior execs, I discover every time all they want is to work with other adults. They don't like this parent-child dynamic either that we've created. It's just something that they're kind of forcing themselves to live with. So my and our work is very much to invite people into a conversation around the dynamics and the patterns that we have co-created, and are they serving us? And the answer is no. And they're definitely not serving any Gen Z. So when there's a Gen Z into the conversation, they're gonna hold up the mirror and they're gonna challenge that taken for granted way of being with each other. I was just this morning, I published an article about one of the people has had a massive impact on my life, a guy called Colin Hall. And the reason why we became friends 32 years ago is because I was a project manager and I heard him speak at an event, and then I heard about a movie that was released. And I didn't have that story in my mind that project managers don't speak to the chairman of the organization. I just contacted him and said, do you want to go to the movies to me? I was hauled onto the red carpet and almost fired, because how dare you speak directly to the chairman when you're just the project manager? And so that was in 1993. I see exactly that with the Gen Zs. They are just not paying attention to all of this nonsense around the hierarchy and who can talk to who and what's the story. And they committed to meet people in a spirit of equality. And that's what makes me excited about this next 20 years in our field, because there's a big shift coming.
I do have a bone to pick with you, because I was listening to your podcast on my run, and you just kept dropping these truth bombs, and I kept having to stop and write notes in my Notion as I was going. So you've ruined my run for the last few days. But you touched on some really big things there. So you talked about the relationship of the cross-generational thing, and a lot of people talk about 5 generations in the workplace. And one of the things you talk about is, what does it mean to be an elder in the organization? How do you pass on that knowledge? And you said something which is really provocative, because advice can be seen as judgment, and how you place that. And also you said something about, until someone actually asks for my advice, I must stay interested and curious. So I'd love you just to open that up, because I think that's almost like a definitive way for us to approach this kind of cross-generational challenge, isn't it?
Well, it's cross-generational, but it's cross-sector, it's cross everything. So again, someone said last week, they said, your wounds become your message, or your mess becomes your message. Your mess becomes your message. So a lot of why I have stories to tell is because I messed up big time. And my messing up came from a story I had about leadership that says leaders must know the way and show the way and give direction. And so I went into the world thinking, people are going to want me to be part of their teams if I know the way and show the way and give direction. And I was quite forceful many times. I'm embarrassed when I look back at that. Passionate, enthusiastic, and forceful. And I had strong ideas, and I would share those ideas. And again, Peter Block came to the rescue because he watched me one day in a conversation, and I think he must have been quite irritated with, where does this level of arrogance come from? So he asked me whether I would. He said, Louise, I wonder. He said, where does all this kind of wanting to be helpful come from? I said, Peter, that's my contribution. I have so much to share and so much to tell people. And he said, I want you to consider the possibility that you being helpful is experienced as a judgment by the people you are sharing all this knowledge with. Oh, my word. I've realized over so many years since then that every time I give unsolicited advice, whether it's to my children or my partners or my colleagues or my husband, they experience my judgment. And then when I have to be honest and look at where is this unsolicited advice come from, it comes from judgment. And so if we think of the neuroscience of judgment that says the moment we feel judged, our prefrontal cortex shuts down, our limbic system fires up, and we're unable to think creatively, then I have to ask myself, what am I trying to achieve here? I want people's prefrontal cortex actively engaged in the conversation. So with my judgment coming to the party, that's making it hard. So I've learned this, and I think it's the most powerful question we can ask. It's the question that has saved many relationships and has had impact on many, many teams. And the question is, do you want to know what I think? Rather than just vomiting my thoughts onto people. And so another person who's had a massive impact on my life is Nancy Klein and her work around a time to think and creating thinking environments. And because I'm committed to be a thinking environment and practice what I've learned from Nancy, I have to be very careful about my sharing my ideas and my thoughts, because every time I do, it's actually quite disempowering, because the person I'm sharing it with doesn't get a chance to develop their own thinking around it. And as a mother, I really wanted to have a good relationship with my children. I discovered that my daughter, who's now 27, Helen, would have her physiology will change depending on whether I gave her the answer or whether I created an opportunity for her to discover the answer. So when I give her the answer, I think you should do X, Y, Z. You can see her whole body goes, oh, I've been told by my mother what to do. When I can support her through my questioning and my accompanying her on her thinking and meeting her where she's at and respecting her boundaries, she goes, I know what I'm going to do, with joy and enthusiasm. Now, why would I want to evoke that level of resistance and, people dragging their feet when I can evoke a sense of excitement and joy about taking the next step or doing something?
But that really requires people to be really aware of how they show up, doesn't it? And how often our own personal needs or preferences really show up, and be really aware of those things, don't we? Because we're going against a life's work, aren't we? Everything that has pointed to us being successful in life is being challenged, isn't it?
Absolutely. So in the session yesterday, we were talking about the story that contribution equals speaking. Because I've discovered, I've had to learn this, many times the biggest contribution I can make is to stay quiet and to create a space for other people to make their own discoveries and to listen with curiosity and interest. So the thing about whether you're an elder or a parent or a person with knowledge and skill, if you can accompany someone else, firstly meet them where they are, which is what we all talk about in the world of OD. But secondly, Garen, I think this is maybe the important thing, paying attention to whom I being in that moment. So that beautiful, in theory, Otto Scharmer and the Presencing Institute often use this quote. And I remember a moment where Otto Scharmer said these words to me. We were in Bhutan, and he said, Bill O'Brien said, the success of the intervention is dependent on the interior condition of the intervener. And that is a truth bomb, because the reality is my being, if I show up as the knowing and the have the answers and the telling other people what to do, their brains shut down. And it's impossible for them to be creative and come to creative solutions because they go into waiting for Louise to have the answers mode, which is not a good place for them or me to be. So that's me personally, but it's true for all of us.
And you are in the domain of very certain people, aren't you? You know, when you're in the exec team level, there's a lot of the sort of the alpha type personality. Potentially the way they've got there is by being certain, and you're inviting them into a certain way. I think you said something about you only learn when you become vulnerable as well. So how do you start to create those conditions where people can be vulnerable?
Yeah, I'm so aware of the session I did this week because we saw such vulnerability. And I think, again, I have to acknowledge these amazing people in my life. So Peter Block always said, it's important for us to connect first as human beings before we go into the content of the doing. And so that's become a practice for me. We always invite people to share something about them as individuals. And there's just something about the process of creating a psychologically safe space, which then enable us to do work that no one thought was possible. So the person whose work has been incredibly impactful for me here is Daniel Kim. So Daniel Kim said the quality, well, he created a model called the Daniel Kim core theory of success. But the important part about this model is that if we want to improve results, we need to look at the quality of the actions we take. But if we want to improve the quality of the actions we take, we need to think about the thinking we do first. So that's Nancy Klein's work. But to complete the model, he said the quality of our thinking depends on the quality of our relationships. So we spend a lot of time on relationship and psychological safety, which links into all of Amy Edmondson and all of the work we know. But what happens then when we create the focus on relationships, people start to get interested in how am I being experienced. So Ben Zander says the key performance indicator for good leadership is whether people's eyes are shining. Now, our eyes do not shine when we have to listen to someone else giving us solutions. Our eyes shine when we are able to contribute to that process and discover things for ourselves. And the most important thing is the person who is so certain is often not able to hear because they're so desperate to get their story across. So again, we have to rethink our story about leadership. So leaders are not necessarily, I think the old story about leadership is leaders must have the answers, give us solutions. I think of leaders as the people who create a space where other people can make their best contribution. So if we, again, another Ben Zander metaphor, he says that the conductor on the stage is the only musician who doesn't make a sound. And he's dependent on his power. His power is dependent on his ability to make other people powerful. So that's my story about leadership. Now, if that's the case, we have to be generous in our being and create an environment where other people can shine rather than being the ones wanting to have the answers and tell other people and shine. And again, mess and message. I used to be very certain. I used to be the one who and it was when I realized that the cost of my certainty was other voices go quiet, because who wants to fight with my certainty?
I was going to say that's how Louise and I connected the very first time. So probably like 2016, I was at a social enterprise conference, and I remember you talking about that on stage, and it's just really stuck with me ever since, and kind of my own relationship with certainty and other people being certain. So it's been a big part of my kind of self-inquiry, I guess, as a practitioner.
And I guess just one thing I just want to add on that as well is it's a big challenge though, isn't it? Because it's like it's how am I valuable? Like, how do I create value in the world changes then, doesn't it? And again, it's that huge shift. So it's almost like before you embark on the work, you need to have informed consent. Like this is really deep work, isn't it, for people to make this change?
Well, and again, this is what's been so beautiful about Partners for Possibility, because we've been, we've put these thoughts into these very important relationships between business leaders and school principals, and many lives were impacted. But I'll never forget two people who came, and I'm going to use their names. I'm sure when they hear the story, they'll enjoy the story. So one of the guys, so this was a partnership. The guy was, now this has a lot of meaning for us in South Africa. He was white, severely Afrikaans. And you might not know what that means, but it means certain and have answers and tell people what to think. That's severely Afrikaans. Engineer, rugby playing, so big. And his whole identity was, I'm a problem solver. I give people solutions. I know stuff. His name was Spike. Now, even just thinking of why was he called Spike? You've got the picture. And Spike came on a course with Rebecca. Now, Rebecca is tiny, a school principal in a very under-resourced environment near Johannesburg, Soweto. Tiny, petite, soft-spoken. Spike was in your face. So I would also always credit Spike with his ability to follow my instructions. So I was inviting Spike into a different way of being, accompany Rebecca, meet her where she is, go through the 5 phases of consulting, lead her to a place where she makes a decision about what to do about her issue, but it's her decision. It's not Spike's decision. It doesn't come from Spike. It's Rebecca's decision. So they went through the whole process and they got to the end of the process. And I asked all of the people in the room, how was it? What happened for you? What was the outcome? And Rebecca turned to Spike with stars in her eyes, but literally, like, everybody in the room was affected by the quality of the look between Rebecca and Spike. And she said to Spike, Spike, now we're all paying attention. Spike, you know what I've discovered? I don't need your answers, but I do need your listening. And in that moment, all of us in the room went, oh my word. And Spike took a step back and you could see he goes, well, where's my contribution going to come from if I'm just going to listen and I'm not going to tell people what to do? And in that same moment, there was a realization that actually I can do so much more when the answers doesn't have to be on my shoulders, but my job is to create an environment where the Rebeccas of this world can come to their own solution. So that moment was a defining moment in the same way, Danny, that when I got the feedback about my certainty was a defining moment for me. And it's so interesting how that story about Karen Van Stone coming to me at Ashridge to say, I want to let you know what happens when you are so certain. That story has impacted many, 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 many lives because certainty is such a pattern of behavior that needs to be interrupted. And again, the Gen Zs are very, very sensitive to that. And I love it when they actually say it, because then people start to pay attention.
Hi, we're just pausing this interview for a moment. Have you ever finished an episode of the OrgDev podcast and wish you had a cheat sheet that summarizes all of the key points? Us too, so we made one. It's called From Pod to Practice, and each week in our newsletter we'll share a 2-page summary of the latest OrgDev episode, and it includes key takeaways, a reflection prompt, and one small action you can try.
And it's all in a digital format with space at the end to add your own notes and reflections, and it's designed to help you take the learning from the podcast into your day-to-day work. So to get your copy, just sign up to our Next Step to Better newsletter. The link's in the show notes, or you can visit our website at www.distinction.live to get the latest From Pod to Practice in your inbox. And let us know what you think. We'd love to get your feedback. So I wanted to ask you a question about OD in South Africa. Is that different from your perspective to kind of OD in other parts of the world?
So we don't
distinctive
have
qualities.
Well, I think so. The difference is that OD's gone through its ups and downs in South Africa. When I first came back to South Africa from the UK in 2005, I felt there was a dearth of professional development, and so we started an academy for organisational development. We started the South African Organisational Development Network. What worries me a little bit about OD now in South Africa is that it's not, people don't. My experience of working in the UK and the US is that people do a degree in OD, or they go and do some development work in OD, and then they become an OD practitioner. But then I've listened to some of your podcast about the kind of just falling into the field. I worry about people who have just fallen into the field. I do think there's a body of knowledge. I think there's an understanding about how organizations work that if you just kind of fall into it. So there are many people who call themselves OD practitioners, and when I have the conversations with them, I find out that they're HR people who are dabbling into doing some development work. The other thing I'm concerned about is the the siloed nature of these various activities. And I'm just want a specific example. So in my mind, leadership development has to be an organizational development intervention. If you're going to do leadership development just for skills development for the people who are in leadership roles, but you don't acknowledge that as part of an organizational development activity, I think you miss a trick. And there's way too much leadership development happening in South Africa that is not even looking at the organization. So, yeah, I sometimes get a bit worried about the state of OD in South Africa, and we are in many conversations about it. You might want to have a conversation at some point with Craig Yateman, who is my kind of thinking partner in the space.
No, I think we see the same thing, particularly around the leadership development as a siloed, isolated activity, not done in the context of the organisation, or that's definitely something we see, isn't it, Garen?
Oh, it is, without a doubt. And I guess it's always curiosity as to why is that? Because it's a symptom of something else. And
the symptom, it's a symptom of people not understanding the field of organizations. So they come through the learning and development field. I mean, even sadly, learning and development people, I so often have conversations around, and so how is this piece of work that you're now going out to on tender for example, how is this linked to the organizational goals, what you're trying to do in the organization, how will it change the culture? And they look at me, that's not my brief. My brief is to do this piece of development work over here. I mean, I find it impossible to think, how can you do a piece of development work here? I found an organization recently, they're doing a big piece of values work, but it's not connected into the organizational development activity. I'm going, how does that happen? How do you think that you can break the organization up into the values piece, the leadership development piece, the HR competency piece, and we don't understand it. It's all part of one big process.
And I'd love to dig a bit deeper on that, because when we did the pre-meet with you, one of the things that just really stood out for me is you were at the University of Hertfordshire in the early 2000s when you did your doctorate. And this was a really remarkable time in the development of the field. There were, like you sort of said, talk about Ralph Stacey, Patricia Shaw, Douglas Griffin, and they were sort of shaping this complexity and management centre. And if anyone ever read this, some amazing books came out of it, looking at things like power and whatnot as well. What was that experience like for you, and how did it shape your world?
Oh, it was an amazing experience. So a few reasons why it was so amazing is, one was, Rolf was very keen. He said, if we're going to think about organizations as complex responsive processes of relating, which is the term that he and Patricia and Doug came up with, then we can't study those organizations from the outside. We have to be inside the organization. And so the idea of a practitioner doctorate in community, so it was a collaborative inquiry. Can't remember exactly how many people we started, but I think it was something like 25 or 30 people who were on this journey together and who were inquiring both into their own practice, but also into the dynamics that got created by us as a community. We became an organization, and we did weird things. And so when I think about people having to do a doctorate on their own, I'm going, that just doesn't resonate with what I think will be most valuable. So the fact that we were doing it in community, we were working in small groups, our practice was changing, continuously changing as we were applying our new insights, and we were doing OD on ourselves and our work through our method of study. It's heartbreaking for me to think that the DMAN program at the Centre for Management Complexity is coming to an end now. I think this is the last year, because it is the way to study. I don't think there's another way to do a doctorate in organizational development or social change than to take your own experience seriously, moment to moment. Now, that has changed my practice, because it's meant that I can't go into a meeting now with taking my own experience seriously and saying, what happened in this conversation? How do I make sense of this? What was my contribution? Or into a shop in a mall when things don't go the way I expect, I dissect, I pay attention, I say, what happened? How do I make sense of this? So that was an amazing experience, and I will be forever grateful for that opportunity.
And you did a particular, as I understand it, a particular specialism working with sort of large group and large group change as well. And that is not for the faint of heart, is it? It's messy, it's unpredictable, it's sometimes a little bit overwhelming. Like, what did you learn during that process and being in the middle of those dynamics in creating change? And how's your practice developed? Because you've also said that you now work with a smaller configuration in terms of like working with groups.
Yeah, well, I work with people who are in organizations. And I mean, whether you're a small organization or a large organization, recently one of the organizations was kind of, tens of thousands of people, but the people we work with have a big impact on all of those people. I think for me, the most important thing is that this work has taught me to become very aware, conscious of the dynamics that we co-create through our participation in those dynamics, and aware of how we are being changed by those dynamics. So we are changing and being changed by our participation in these processes. So, I think we can easily get overwhelmed by the fact that there's, large numbers, but it's the same dynamics. It's the same pattern. There are patterns of behavior. There are stories that are being told. People are acting on their interpretation of that story. That shapes them. It shapes their contribution. And so it just means that this whole system is available for us to intervene in. And sometimes the opportunity come to intervene at the highest level of the organization. This group I worked with this week is a group of middle managers. And they've actually realized that gives them so much opportunity to influence, because they can influence upwards, they can influence sideways, they can influence downwards, they can influence. So it's about inviting a group of people to become citizen leaders, back to that conversation, and acknowledging their contribution and being very clear around what are the parts of the system that's working. That's the other thing. I think most organizations are so deficiency focused or focusing on what's wrong. There's so much for us to celebrate. And part of my work over the last few years have really been about acknowledging what's working and what's good and what is worth celebrating, and then working together to figure out what do we need to do to, what needs to be addressed and what needs to change. The bottom line for me is that as a practitioner, I don't want to, the word consulting, I use the word consulting in my work all the time. I think of myself as a practitioner. As a practitioner, when I walk into a space, it's so exciting. It's so exciting to know all the dynamics and what's going on and to get interested. And I think that's what OD practitioners need more than anything else. It's just a very healthy sense of curiosity, and curiosity around how did we get here? What are the factors that contributed to this way of being?
Do you mind if I just ask you an optional question? Is that okay? Because one of the things that's really come out from interviewing so many, I think we recorded 85 episodes now as of today, is there's a real link of a lot of the sort of practitioners saying the early years in their profession, they feel a certain amount of imposter phenomenon. Who am I? How do I know I'm doing OD? How do I feel like I'm practicing? And one of the interviews I was watching, you sort of said that, by the age of 40, you'd done like 4 degrees and a doctorate and whatnot as well. And it was a certain amount of feeling like, am I good enough to contribute? Like, how do you sort of work alongside people like leading things like Ralph Stacey and that, and then go on to find your place in that system as well and feel like you flourish in your practice?
So
it's an optional question.
So now I'm going to tell a story that very few people know. Ralph was doing some work in South Africa, and just in that time where I was writing up my thesis, and I had things to say, but if I was going to say it, I feared that I would be shunned from the community because I disagreed with Ralph. There was a very specific it was about intentionality, and it was about intentionality. So I disagreed with Ralph, but I couldn't get myself to say it, and I couldn't get myself to write it because I felt, who am I to challenge Ralph Stacey? And I don't know whether Ralph knew this at the time, but he came to South Africa and he invited me for coffee, and he said, Louise, I don't know whether you've got it in you to finish this thing. Oh my word, that's like such a dare. I remember leaving that conversation going, stuff you, Rolf Stacey, I'll show you. And I went back to my office and I wrote all the things that I wanted to say about Rolf that I didn't agree with. And it kind of just suddenly a whole new world opened up. So I think there's a point for all of us where we just go, stuff it. We're not going to hold on to these old stories of, disempowerment and imposter. I have a contribution to make and I'm going to bloody well make it now.
But I think there is a certain, because sometimes it's very easy to be quite hierarchical in OD, isn't there? It's like, you've got your thought leaders or academics at the top, and what is my contribution? But your perspective really matters, doesn't it? So whatever you are, and I when I think about my career, I think I did some of my best consulting when I was at the very early stage, because I didn't have these assumptions,
sure.
And that's what.
A 27-year-old daughter, and I was telling many of her of the stories about her this week. I am so inspired by what this woman is doing. She doesn't recognize herself as an OD consultant. She is having a massive organizational development impact in the organization that she's working in, but partly because she's conscious. She pays attention. She has been part of the conversations around this. So I think the imposter syndrome come when you're not part of a community where you are taking your own experience seriously. It's almost as I really genuinely think that when practitioners are committed to paying attention to their practice and sharing it with other people, the imposter syndrome will disappear. I genuinely think that, because then you kind of start to realize that the work we do has impact and is incredibly valuable. But it's hard to do that on your own. It's hard to discover that on your own and to know that on your own. And yeah, my four degrees was because I wanted my dad to be proud of me. And he's 90 something. He's never going to say it. So I've kind of also had to accept that. That's not going to happen. So move on.
So I wanted to ask you, so 2025 is a big year for you. So it's your 60th birthday year. And you've made a kind of conscious decision to really think deeply about kind of your career so far, and there's a really good series of articles that you're releasing on LinkedIn. So if people aren't following Louise on LinkedIn, then really do, because you're sharing 60 people over the year who've shaped your life so far. You've mentioned some of them, kind of Nancy Klein and Peter Block, and they're just really, really interesting articles. So I really encourage people to do that. What's driven you to kind of use this as an opportunity to kind of reflect and do that kind of thinking?
Well, I think well, firstly, I just have a real, I'm very aware of how hard it is for people to hear positive appreciations from other people. And I've got some of the most amazing people that I know. When I try and get them in a room where we acknowledge and appreciate them, it's excruciating for them. So I think there's some work to be done for all of us to learn to accept appreciation. But again, the joy of facilitating hundreds of flawless consulting workshops, one of the key parts in the flawless consulting workshop is to give each other feedback, to hold up the mirror and say, you are a gift and a contribution to the world, and let me tell you what gifts I'm getting from working with you. It is unbelievable how many people had no idea. They had no idea how much their colleagues enjoy them. So appreciation is one of the 10 components of a thinking environment. It's part of my work in everything that I do. And so I was thinking, how do I make this celebration an expression of my own theory around acknowledging and appreciating and celebrating? And I'm not going to have a big party because I'm going on a diving holiday with my family. So that wasn't an option. And I'm also at this point in my life really do not need things to be about me anymore. But I have a lot to say about all these amazing people who've contributed to my life. So the celebrating 60 people at 60 has become just such a joy, because I've had to kind of go back and think and the stories come from the last 60 years, and there are some beautiful stories that I have told and more stories to come. So yeah, so it's been an amazing gift for me, and it has also created this beautiful ripple in our community. Because this morning, the story about Colin Hall, who passed away last year, and we've all been very sad to have lost him, because he was a big figure in all of our lives. In kind of pulling other people into the conversation that I haven't spoken to for a long time, but I know they had a relationship with Colin. I'm very excited about what might come out of this, and we'll be seeing this week how people are responding to that. So it's also a way I'm very passionate about this idea of strengthening the fabric of our community. And so it's another opportunity for us to strengthen the fabric of our community.
What do you enjoy most about the work that you do?
This morning I had a call with one of the MDs of a company we're working in, and they were very, very stuck. So it was a group of people in a manufacturing business, and they were just stuck. And so we did an intervention with them about 6 weeks ago. And this morning's call was to get feedback to find out what's going on. And I couldn't keep the smile on my face, because everything she said, oh my God, she said, Louise, that moment was a turning point. The organization's never going to be the same again. We've been implementing these ideas. So it is for me about impact and knowing that what we're doing has real measurable value, and you can see the change like weeks and months after the intervention or during the intervention. Because I do believe that we need to have a longer line of attention. So when we start to work with people, it's not just about what's going to happen this week and a quick 2-day workshop and then everything's done. We have to come back, and we know in our practices is that phase 5 in the consulting process. It's the reflect. It's the what are we learning? How are we making sense of this? What do we want to do differently because of the success we've had in August? So that was our conversation today. She was saying, shall we move our reflection session out to October? I said, no. We've just done an amazing piece of work. We need to now pause and reflect and learn from the experience and then go forward. And then, Danny, just interestingly, a lot of the feedback we get is that the work we do has lots of impact for people in organizations, but in many ways it also impacts their relationship with their children and their relationship with their partners. And I celebrate that, because I really do think we are not investing enough in our understanding about how families work and what this next generation of children need. And so parents are often doing very stupid things, and they're behaving from the same story that drive their behavior at work, drive their behavior at home. So they become very certain. They tell the children what they should be doing. It's actually very disempowering. Kids don't want to spend time with parents who treat them in that way. I have 2 daughters who love to spend time with their parents, because I've been applying these ideas from when they were very little.
What are some of the more challenging aspects of the work? What do you find challenging?
So it's interesting. I think there's also a point. I mean, I've been practicing for about 40 years now. So there's a point in your career where every challenge just becomes another juicy opportunity. And so challenge. So I don't feel so much challenged as I find, here's another thing, another wonderful opportunity to contribute and make a difference.
That's a brilliant way to frame it.
Yeah. Can I just ask a question on the back of that as well? Because you mentioned the word earlier, stuck. And we often get called in when organisations are stuck. But prevention's always better than cure, isn't it? So sometimes stuck is part of the process, isn't it? They have to be stuck to feel they'd be released. But if you're inside an organisation and you may not know that you need this work, but what are some of the symptoms or kind of cues or things that might be sort of demonstrating we need to do this work now?
So we think that, again, it comes from Van Rhyn, that the key performance indicator for great leadership is whether people's eyes are shining, and whether we experience joy, and whether there's energy, and we have a sense of kind of we're doing the work that we do doesn't feel painful and back to the word stuck. So when I hear people use words like toxicity and low energy, and we're just not getting the impact that we want, and the results are not good enough, those are the pain points. That's what gives us some kind of insight. And especially with regard to collaboration, I think nowadays we really have to learn how to work across boundaries. And one of the key enablers for working across boundaries is our willingness to meet each other where we are, with our judgment and with a spirit of curiosity and interest. So again, you hear the same themes over and over again. So we get excited when a group of people are finding it hard to work, because then we go, okay, here's an opportunity for us to learn and do something. I mean, obviously, we're not celebrating the fact that it's hard. We're celebrating the opportunity to do something different. So, but it requires a leader. It requires a brave leader, because often the leader is part of the challenge and therefore potentially part of the solution. It requires a brave leader, and I enjoy it much more if the leaders contact me than the HR team contact me, because then there's already been some kind of level of diagnosis. It's when a leader say, I'm not comfortable that my team and I have figured out how to work well together, or this project is at risk because we haven't figured out how to work well together. So that's where we can make our biggest contribution.
One of the things you talk about is the importance of being vulnerable, and when we're vulnerable, we learn. And I was watching an interview that you did with Faith Mangopi. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. And you did a really lovely interview. And she asked a brilliant question, which is, can a leader be too vulnerable? Because often there's a fear within leaders going, if I'm vulnerable, then I'm showing weakness and whatnot as well. So it isn't how it is, but we need to work through those beliefs, don't we?
So if we value the relationships require a level of vulnerability, and people negotiate that vulnerability. And so I don't think there's a too vulnerable, because we will moderate. We moderate our behavior when we become in tune. And maybe that's the thing, is that we talk about the best organizations people metaphorically play rugby rather than tennis. So in an organization where we play rugby, we are attuned to each other. Now, the South African, our rugby team's doing very well. We've been the world champions for a long time. So we have a fantastic example to look at. And in that team, one of the reasons why this is maybe a trade secret, but one of the reasons why the South African rugby team is doing so well is they have invested in their relationships, firstly. Secondly, they are incredibly attuned to each other. So not a single one of those players play for themselves. They play for the team, and they are keeping an eye on their colleagues, and they won't just pass the ball without knowing, is my colleague ready to take this ball? So they are very attuned, and they've learned how to be attuned to each other. And they committed to the team success rather than their individual success. So that's what leaders who do that, leaders who are attuned to each other, who are committed to the team success, who create a space where people can flourish and do their best work, don't ever have to worry about, am I being too vulnerable? Because they'll know what to share and what not to share, and the system becomes the kind of moderating contributor to the relationship.
And if a 6'8", 120 kilo South African man can be vulnerable, then everyone can be vulnerable, can't they?
Exactly. And I mean, we have lots of fun at the expense of our very certain South African men. But the other thing that's in the last few months have become a big theme is this, just like, it's really unattractive to be in the presence of someone who throws their weight around like that. And there are very few people who enjoy that. But it's incredibly attractive to work with leaders who take themselves and how they come across seriously, who invest the effort and time to understand what it will require for them to get the best out of other people. And it's incredibly attractive to be with leaders who are willing to listen and learn, rather than always act as if they know and have the answers. Because we know, on some level, that it's a lie. We know that their bravado is actually just masking something that's now not available to us, and therefore feels it's in the dark. So a while ago, one of the guys came to a workshop. He said, "Louise, you know what I've discovered? I've discovered that men who listen are attractive." I said, exactly. Exactly. Just go and tell your friends.
One question we always like to ask is, how do you invest in your own learning and development to keep you kind of sharp and learning? What does that look like for you now at this point in your career?
Because surely you've mastered everything by now.
No, I'm continuing to learn. So a few things. I do believe, again, it's my commitment to walk my own talk. I take my own experience seriously. So when I get when things are when I'm surprised by either how well things are, or worked or didn't work, I write in full sentences. I think that human beings learn and make sense of the world through the process of articulation. And I articulate either in full sentences on my journal, or I articulate in the presence of a thinking partner. So again, Nancy Clown's work around time to think. And so I have a series of thinking partners who I would call. This morning I had a thinking partnership conversation or a thinking session. And because I have to make a decision about something and I'm not entirely sure how to make the decision, and I needed to hear myself think about it in her presence, because I know she cares about me. And in doing that, I learned so much about myself. I learned something about the client. And then that led to 3 more conversations, because I suddenly realized that I needed to invite other people into this conversation. I have another conversation coming up very shortly after this conversation. So for me, and then I read. I mean, I'm a ferocious reader. But the starting point is to write and to make sense of the experience in a way that gives me access to new insights. Often I write and I go, my word, I had no idea that's what I think. And again, that comes from having done that doctorate with Rolf Stacey, because that was my experience. You would write and then suddenly just come to new insights that you just didn't even know that was there.
Fabulous. And you've mentioned various kind of books and reference materials. Are there any particular books or resources you recommend to listeners to go and look up?
Definitely. So firstly, Art of Possibility by Ben and Rosander. Best leadership book ever. Nancy Klein wrote 3 books. The first one is, and what I'm giving you now is the curriculum of 90% of the leadership programs we do have these books as their, this is, our workshops are based on these books. So Nancy Klein's first book is Time to Think, then More Time to Think, and lastly, The Promise That Changes Everything. But if you're going to start with the first one and then read the second one and the third one. Peter Block, Flawless Consulting, best book for anybody in the world of OD. If you've not read Flawless Consulting, I think you're doing yourself a disservice. And his second book, the book that actually led me to him, is called Community, The Structure of Belonging. An amazing book and definitely worth reading. And then in the last few years, and this is post Partners for Possibility, we have come across Hubert Joly's book, The Heart of Business. So now we have found The Heart of Business just pulls everything together. It's the most amazing way to end a leadership journey, is to reflect on that book and to look at the parallels between the book and the experience of people in the organization.
Brilliant. Some really rich reading there as well. And we want to just finish with the same question we ask every practitioner that comes on, is what advice would you give someone who's just starting out in organization development now? So there could be that HR person looking into OD again, there has to be another way, or they're just being curious about OD. What advice would you give them? And we're asking you to give advice, by the way.
Thank you. So firstly, read Flawless Consulting. I mean, I really think I can't imagine an OD person into the world without having got that foundational understanding of, and read that book with the expectation to mine. Like every second page has some gold dust. Make the mark. Second thing is join a community. And, if you're lucky enough to live in the UK or US, wherever, there are amazing communities. Join a community, go to the conference, and go and attend some courses. Do the 101 of organizational development. Make sure that you understand the field before you assume that because you come from HR, you understand the field. There is a body of knowledge, and it's worth studying the body of knowledge. And sign up to the OrgDev Podcast on YouTube so that you can continue to be challenged on a very regular basis. And, the work that Gavin, you and Danny are doing, it's phenomenal. And I just don't want any practitioner to miss out on being part of your community as well.
We just want to say a huge thank you, Louise. It's been such a brilliant conversation. It really has. When I said introduce you as the remarkable, you genuinely are. I've had goosebumps at numerous points during this conversation today. Danny, what are you taking away from today's conversation?
Yeah, it's going to be one of those top episodes I think we've recorded, and it's one I want to listen back to already. It's like I just want to go back and listen to that again, and that's always a really good sign. So I think I really love the conversations about citizen leadership and the importance of kind of helping people become citizens rather than consumers. I think what you talked about, the kind of importance of stories and people realizing they're co-owning and co-creating their own realities, is something we can kind of really lean on. And the importance of rethinking our stories about what leadership is and how we develop leaders, and we can't do that in silos. There's many more I could go on. Garrett, I'll steal all yours.
Yeah, I've got so many takeaways, and I've thoroughly enjoyed researching this interview. Some of the things that have come out from this conversation is like the KPI for your team is do your team's eyes shine, and that being a sign of good leadership. I think, sometimes we get overwhelmed by data, don't we? And it's like, well, no, you can actually see it viscerally, can't you? Your mess becomes your message, I think should be doctrine for a lot of people. And actually asking, do you want to know what I think? Because again, you sort of said they will come back to you eventually anyway, because they'll be curious. But in the moment, you've actually defined the relationship in a slightly different way, haven't you?
When I say to my daughter, do you want to know what I think? She often tests me. She says, no, not interested. And if I then honor that no, chances are that she's going to come back and say, no, I am interested. But she first tests me. She says, can you hold your mouth if I say no? And I tell you, that was hard for me. And it's still hard. But that's the test, is can we honor their no? And even because everybody always says, yeah, but I want to stop them from making the mistakes. That's not your job. You can't stop anybody from making the mistakes. You can contribute to their thinking if they are willing to hear you. If they're not willing to hear you and you just dump your stuff on them, they're going to resist you. I mean, what's useful in that?
And the last thing you mentioned, I think is just really important, is meet them where they are. I think that's one of the big things, and that's a huge mantra that we forget sometimes. We can over-intellectualize things, and we're coming from a different place. Meet people where they are, and that's where the journey begins. If people want to follow your work, if they want to explore all the brilliant, incredible projects that you're involved in, you do an excellent LinkedIn newsletter that we really enjoy reading as well. What's the best way for people to reach out to you and potentially, even engage you to come and work with them?
Well, I'd love that. So I have discussed now, I used to be really bad at LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn has become a real mainstay for my work now. So best way is follow me on LinkedIn, send me a direct message. I will respond. That's how we got connected. Yeah, and I mean, you've now got me thinking I'm going to be in the UK soon. We might want to arrange a flawless consulting workshop when I'm there, because it is a life-changing 2-day workshop. We get that feedback all the time. So let's keep in touch about that possibility.
All of the things that you shared with us today, we'll put all of the links in the show notes. If you do want to reach out to Louise, if you want to explore more about her work, the programs that she runs, then please do check it out in the show notes as well, whether you're listening to this on audio or you're watching it on the video as well. For those of you that are watching, one of the things that we just are so impressed about is the number of shares that we get. So if you're watching this and you know someone who you think would benefit from listening to Louise's insights, wisdom and experience and know-how, then please do share it with them. It's one of the great things. We're now in 89 countries, Danny.
Indeed.
Which is brilliant, which just sort of reflects the appetite for organisation development around the world, which is brilliant. And Louise, I think your interview takes a really well-placed position in our portfolio of brilliant guests that we've had so far as well. So Louise, I want to say a huge thank you. It's been a real honour, and it feels really nice time to talk to you as well, as you're reflecting back on your career as well and the people that have influenced you. So thank you so much on behalf of everyone who's watching the podcast today. So thank you.
And a big thank you from me as well. It's been an amazing conversation.
Fab.